welcome to UnJustified, where we always cover the truth, the facts, the good, the bad, the ugly, on an unbiased and sometimes very unpopular opinion. I just wanted to touch base with everyone and let them know that I'm going to start digging into some other cases as well, closed and cold. There's several, and I just want to go over a few of them with you that we are definitely about to start getting into. And one of them, the very first one we're going to talk about actually, is one that our superfans recommended. Pinkman recommended Darlie Routier. Darlie Routier is a very unique one. Some of you may remember her case, some may not. And I will go into just in a minute and give you kind of a briefing, and maybe the ones that do remember the case will be like, oh yeah, I remember that. And then the ones that don't, it's definitely going to spark their interest. Darlie's been in prison on death row for 24 years. She's always maintained that she is absolutely innocent. She's never, ever said that she was guilty. When it first happened, as you well know, we didn't have anything but mainstream media to actually give us the details and such as that. Completely said she is guilty as hell. She deserves everything she gets. Okay, but now that we've got the internet and the World Wide Web, go in and dig deeper into cases. Well, I haven't even thought about Darlie's case in years and years. Well, when Pink Mint actually brought her name up, I was like, I remember that name. So I kind of Googled it up and I was like, oh yeah, that is a good one, but why? She's guilty as hell. Well, I started digging into it a little bit. And so let me just give you a little briefing on who she is. And some of you is definitely going to remember her case. And then there's others that's going to be like, I haven't heard of it, but that's very interesting. She is definitely one of those 50-50 cases. Here's the thing with Darlie. She has been sitting on death row awaiting lethal injection for 24 years, which says that she could be getting her execution date at any time. So if she is truly innocent, and even her husband is maintaining that she's innocent, if she is truly innocent, then, you know, if she was to get her execution date tomorrow, it's going to be too late very soon for her. And that's what I'm saying with her. So her case is definitely worth looking at for a second time, because there again, she has always maintained her innocence. So let me tell you about her case just a little bit, and then we'll go into another few cases, and I'll let you know, and we'll brief on them as well. So I'll make sure everybody knows which cases that I've got in mind that we're about to start digging into. Don't worry, we're going to continue to cover the Watts case. Okay, this is Darlie Routier and her two sons, Damon and Devin. Darlie was charged with the murder, stabbing death of one of her sons, but she has never been tried for the murder of the other one. Now, they were both killed at the same time, but she was only tried for the one. This happened in June of 1996, and just a little bit about it if you're not real familiar. Some of you may remember her case from seeing her infamous video being at his grave, and she was shooting silly string on his grave. They had a birthday party at the gravesite. What happened is in June of 1996, Darlie made a very frantic 911 call from her Dallas County home. Now, I heard the 911 call, and when we go into this case, I will definitely play it for you guys as well. And to me, it doesn't sound fake. It sounds like she is literally frantic in this call to me. When police got there, they found her two sons, Devin, who was 6, and Damon, who was 5, dying of stab wounds. But there were also stab wounds to Darlie's neck, forearm, and shoulder. Broken wine glass lay on the ground, and there was torn window screen in the garage. There was a bloody knife that was laying on the kitchen counter. Darlie told police that she had fallen asleep on a downstairs couch watching television, and she was awakened by Damon touching her and calling her name when she noticed an intruder inside their house. She said she told Damon to stay behind and saw a long-haired white man wearing a baseball cap and a t-shirt and jeans, and he was fleeing through the kitchen out the utility room. She found the bloody knife on the ground, put it on the counter, and then she realized that her and her boys had been stabbed. She said her screams woke up her husband Darren, who was upstairs with their infant son, Drake, and Darren rushed down the stairs and tried without success to revive one of their two sons. Less than a half hour after they arrived at the house, authorities doubted Darlie's version of events. It was the overall scene which primarily is the lack of evidence in many cases, but the entire scene indicated that there was not an intruder, and one of the crime scene consultants, James Cront, even testified that the whole entire crime scene indicated that there had not been an intruder. In the police telling, she had staged a break-in, murdered her sons, and cut her own throat, all to collect on the boys' $5,000 insurance policies. Now keep in mind, this is not $5,000 apiece, it's $2,500 apiece, and that's why they assumed that she did it. That was her motive. Days after the murders, a local television station ran a clip of Darlie smiling and spraying silly string on the boys' balloon-covered graves, singing "Happy Birthday" on what would have been Devin's 7th birthday. And Darlie said, quote, "Even though our hearts are breaking, I don't know that Devin and Damon would want us to be happy," quote unquote. She actually told the news stations, quote, "Even though our hearts are breaking, I know that Devin and Damon would want us to be happy," unquote. The clip sickened Dallas County District Attorney, and he said, quote, "Because it had only been weeks since the boy's death, and yet we've got a full-blown birthday party out there at the graveside, and it really struck me as more than curious," unquote, he said in a television interview. Darlie was charged with capital murder days later. At the trial, the prosecution presented a timeline showing that Darlie stabbed Devin and Damon before staging the scene by breaking a wine glass, cutting the screen in the garage, planting a bloody sock down an alley 75 yards away, and finally stabbing herself in the arms and throat. In addition, the state based its case on presenting as evidence details that went to the kind of mother Routier was. Prosecutors played a 15-second clip of Darlie happily spraying silly string on Devin's grave, and then he told the jurors, quote, "This scene gives you a lot of insight into this woman. You see, this is not a picture of a grieving mother," unquote. And I have to say that video is exactly why I said she was guilty as well. The state called witnesses to highlight that Routier had breast implants, did not take her children to church very often, went out with girlfriends the night before Mother's Day, and wore jewelry. Though defense attorney Doug Mulder presented medical and psychiatric experts who said they believed she was telling the truth about the intruder and that her wounds did not appear self-inflicted. He presented no forensic testimony to rebut the state's staging theory, citing the lack of evidence. Forensic evidence, Assistant District Attorney Greg Davis told the jurors in closing argument, quote, "It speaks volumes to you, sometimes what you don't see and hear," unquote. The jury voted to convict Routier and sentence her to death in February of 1997. During their deliberations, juror Charles Sanford later said in an affidavit the jury replayed the silly string clip 8 or 9 times. Later, Sanford saw the full video, which showed that the birthday party followed a solemn prayer service and was done as a way to mourn for the children. And he said, quote, "Had we been shown this other tape so that we had been able to see the whole picture of what happened that day, I believe I would not have voted to convict Darlie," unquote. A series of post-conviction petitions as well as a Texas monthly investigation have cast significant doubt on the state case. For one thing, Darlie and every known person in her house that night have been excluded as a source of a bloody fingerprint that was found on a coffee table. And Darlie was excluded as a source of another bloody print on the door to the utility room, which absolutely suggested evidence of an intruder. The state said a fiber found on a bread knife was evidence that Routier used to cut the garage window screen, but that fiber was also consistent with the fiberglass brush that had previously been used to dust for fingerprints. In the post-conviction petition, attorney Richard Burr also cast doubt on the prosecution contention that the bloody sock found in the alley had been part of the evidence staged by Routier. The athletic sock had both boys' blood on it, but none of Routier's. Given the pathologist's estimate that Damon could have survived his wound for only 9 minutes, that the 911 call lasted 6 minutes, and that police arrived within a minute after the end of the call, and that barely left over 2 minutes for Darlie to, quote, stab her sons, head for the garage, step through the slit in the window screen, jump a back fence, or go through the back gate, run barefoot for 75 yards down an alley, drop a bloody sock, run 75 yards back, stab herself, clean up blood around the sink, and stage whatever crime scene there was left to be staged. There was also questions about the state's contention that Darlie had stabbed her children herself. Her nightshirt that prosecution witnesses suggested had been caused by knife splatter as she performed an overhead stabbing of her sons. Yet, the droplets contained her blood as well as her sons. Left unexplained was how her blood was on the knife as she stabbed her sons. If the state timeline was correct, Darlie originally was represented by a state-appointed team that had hired 2 forensic scientists to review the evidence from the crime scene. But before the trial began, Darlie replaced that team with Mulder, a prominent local defense attorney. Texas Monthly reported post-trial that Darren admitted he had been considering an insurance scam shortly before the murders. However, a private investigator working on Darlie's appeal found no evidence he had taken the scam any farther. There's many people that think she's guilty still. Many people think she's innocent. There's lots of flaws in her story, lots of flaws in the investigation, even her defense. So this is a very good case, and it's very worth the time of dissecting, and I think you're all going to find it very interesting, because I believe maybe a lot of you were just like me. Oh, she's completely guilty. But seeing that we really haven't looked into it, since we do have the information highway, many people has and may change that thought process. So this is one of the cases we're going to be getting into, getting her execution date at any day. But definitely wasn't her fingerprint, definitely wasn't her footprint. So whose was it? A lot of people think it's her husband's. But moving right along into the next case, Stephen Avery, Brandon Dassey. There's not a whole lot of people that don't know about this case. If you have Netflix and you have not saw the 2 series, Making a Murderer, I highly suggest it. I wish I could say this is like a 50-50 case as well, but I can't. I would have to say this case lays more so on the lines of maybe 80-20 or maybe even 90-10. These guys are innocent, in my opinion, completely innocent. If you're not real familiar with this case, let me kind of break it down really quickly, because most everybody knows about this case, but some of you don't. I saw that in the live stream we done about it. So
now to a hot trend taking over TV, a Netflix documentary series that has captivated the nation.
Making a Murderer explores the strange legal odyssey of Stephen Avery, who in 2007 was sentenced to life in prison without parole for the murder of a 25-year-old woman. In the 4 weeks since the series was released, a frenzy of binge-watching, fueling conspiracy theories and outrage, both among those who think Avery was wrongly convicted, framed even, and those who think the documentary is at best misleading. Is Stephen Avery a killer? The documentary begins here in 2003. Stephen Avery had just been released from prison after serving 18 years for a rape he didn't commit.
I'm glad you're home, honey.
Exonerated by DNA evidence. But then, 2 years later, just as Avery is in the middle of a multi-million-dollar lawsuit against the authorities who put him away, those very same authorities charge him with murder.
I want people out there to know that I didn't do it, I'm innocent.
The once celebrated face of wrongful convictions, now accused of killing and dismembering Teresa Halbach, a young photographer who'd come to the Avery family's scrapyard to take pictures of a vehicle he was selling. Her charred remains found near Avery's trailer.
It's hard enough, going to prison for something you didn't do. Then you gotta do it all over again?
The story caught the attention of two aspiring filmmakers, Moira Demos and Laura Ricciardi, who packed up and moved to Wisconsin.
We were there because we wanted to ask bigger questions about the system. Is it guilty beyond a reasonable doubt? And is the process fair? Can we trust the verdict?
They ended up devoting a decade to the project, gaining extraordinary access to the main players, from Avery, who spoke to them by phone from jail.
They wouldn't look at nobody else. They're paying all their attention to me.
To his family, waiting on the outside.
They don't care. They'll take an innocent man and make him guilty, and that's what they're doing right now.
To Avery's defense team, who argued that their client was being railroaded, alleging that the local sheriffs, furious about Avery's lawsuit, framed him.
How many times will Stephen Avery be charged in Manitowoc County with rapes he didn't commit?
The filmmakers capture key moments.
Let me tell you, this is a red-letter day for the defense.
Like when Avery's attorneys discovered that a vial of their client's blood, evidence from his first wrongful conviction, appears to have been tampered with.
Some officer went into that file, took a sample of Stephen Avery's blood, and planted it in the RAV4.
Also in the film, we see that the lawyers believe the police planted something else, the key to Teresa Halbach's Toyota.
When you came into that bedroom the first time, there was no key on the floor, was there?
That's correct.
It wasn't discovered until the 7th search of Avery's bedroom, and it just so happened to have been found by two members of the local sheriff's department who had recently been deposed in Avery's civil lawsuit. Sitting here today, all these years later, do you still believe that the department or members of the department framed Stephen Avery?
I'm still left with real reasons to suspect that.
Making a Murderer has transformed Avery's former defense attorney, the eloquent and emotional Dean Strang, into a sort of digital age folk hero.
Redemption will have to wait, as it so often does in human affairs.
We met him in his office where he said the case still troubles him 9 years later.
I want him out of prison. I really am sort of haunted by the concern that he's sitting there innocent.
In stark opposition to Strang, some on the internet have identified a villain, the man who put Avery away, prosecutor Ken Kratz. When we arrived at his office, he showed us nasty emails.
I hope your daughter gets raped and murdered.
And threatening voicemails.
I'm going to do everything in my power to free Steve Avery, and then I'm coming after you.
Kratz blames the filmmakers.
This is not a documentary at all. It's still a defense advocacy piece of what they pick and choose causes only one reaction and only one conclusion, that Mr. Avery was innocent.
Kratz points out that there was a mountain of evidence against Avery. Halbach's remains and her car, both found on his property, and Avery's DNA found on that key, which Kratz says was only discovered on the 7th search because that's when it fell out of the back of this bookshelf. Kratz also points out that the jury rejected the framing defense.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Stephen A. Avery, guilty of first-degree intentional homicide.
In part because they saw vital pieces of evidence the documentarians excluded, including that Stephen Avery's DNA from sweat was also found on the hood latch of Teresa Halbach's RAV4.
Why is that important? Because you can't plant, first of all, sweat. How do you leave that out of the documentary?
If his hand was there, why didn't you find fingerprints?
Well, they're looking for DNA. That's what was looked for, and that's what they found.
So that you're saying they didn't look for
I
fingerprints?
don't know.
I would imagine this would be a pretty important thing to know. You're alleging that he drove this vehicle and hit it. I would imagine his fingerprints would be all over the thing.
They might have. I don't have the case file.
According to Kratz, perhaps the most damning omission in the series, Avery made 3 calls to Halbach the day she went missing, and also requested her by name to come photograph the van he was selling.
Stephen Avery did not just come upon Teresa Halbach by accident. He targeted her.
If, as you say, Avery was targeting Teresa Halbach, why would he call and specifically request her? Wouldn't that just be a trail right back to him?
He believed, at least my theory is, that using a different name and a different phone number was good enough.
But that would require him to be pretty stupid.
Okay.
We ran Kratz's complaints by the filmmakers. His argument is that you left out some key things, and that in the end, it was pro-Stephen Avery misrepresentation.
I disagree with Ken Kratz. It would be impossible for us to include all of the evidence that was presented at trial. That's called a trial. What we made was a documentary. Kratz himself later said that he presented a circumstantial forensic science case, and that's what we tried to show in the documentary. He did not have direct evidence of Stephen Avery's guilt. I'm sure if he did, he would have used it.
sometimes lost in the uproar over the Avery case, that he was not the only one convicted for the murder of Teresa Halbach. His 16-year-old nephew was also sent to prison, in part because of what he told police.
Who shot her in the head?
He did.
Why didn't you tell us that?
Because I couldn't think of it.
But was this admission
Corner. Kim Kardashian joining the push for Wisconsin's governor to grant Brendan Dassey clemency. And ABC's Kana Whitworth joins us with more. Good morning, Kana.
Hey, Eva, good morning. So Brendan Dassey has spent more than 13 years in prison for a crime that his lawyers say he did not commit. And after his most recent appeal was denied, his legal team is going straight to Wisconsin's governor. And this morning, they have some new hope that Kim Kardashian's celebrity will help his plea for clemency.
Be honest with us. We already know it's okay.
This morning, the case against convicted murderer Brendan Dassey getting the attention of Kim Kardashian West. The media mogul is working towards taking the bar exam herself and advocating for prisoners, tweeting her support for Dassey, who was convicted in 2006 at the age of 16 alongside his uncle Steve Avery in connection to the murder of photographer Teresa Halbach. Brendan's case became a global sensation after being highlighted in the 2015 Netflix docuseries Making a Murderer.
There's no getting around it because we see the footage and we know that he didn't know anything about the crime. And we know, anyone who knows him, as I do, knows that he's not capable of hurting a fly.
Kardashian West getting the attention of her 62 million Twitter followers after tweeting Dassey's handwritten plea to Wisconsin's governor.
Kim has an incredible platform and a powerful spotlight that she can shine on serious injustices like Brendan's case.
In the letter, Dassey asks the governor for a pardon, claiming his innocence and writing he wants to go home.
Well, I just wanted it all over with, so I said whatever they wanted to hear, you know.
Brendan's defense team has filed petitions for clemency, arguing that his confession, a major factor in his conviction, was coerced and severely impacted by his low IQ.
We ask for very belated, but so desperately needed justice for this man.
They literally went to his high school and pulled him out of his class and brought him to the interrogation room, even without his mother knowing. His mother found out about it later when she got off work to the police department, but they had already interrogated him. The thing of it is, everything he said was proven false. None of the things he said that he saw, he witnessed happening could be proven. There was no blood. There's just all kinds of things. And I know if you saw it, the Netflix series, then you know what I'm talking about. If you hadn't, I highly recommend it. And if you don't have Netflix, we will be dissecting this. And I'm going to be putting things about all the cases we're about to go over. I'm going to be live streaming them on the Facebook page. I can't do it here because of copyright issues. I will be putting them on the Facebook page all weekend for you to look at and watch. So, if you're not a member of our Facebook group, I highly recommend going and joining. You will find the link to our Facebook group in the description box below. So I live stream there quite regularly, and it's always going to be about true crime. Everything I'm live streaming there. Okay, moving right along to the next one. Gypsy Rose case. Okay, this was a case that had endless twists and turns. Dee Blanchard was 48. She was found stabbed to death in her home on June the 14th of 2015 after the neighbors had saw a very disturbing post on her Facebook. The post read, quote, "The bitch is dead," unquote. Investigators determined Dee Dee's body had lain in a pool of her own blood for several days before being discovered. And equally terrifying to those who knew and loved Dee Dee was the fact that her seemingly severely disabled daughter, Gypsy Rose, was missing. For as long as anyone knew Dee Dee, they knew how much Gypsy and Gypsy's health meant to her. Gypsy Rose suffered from leukemia, asthma, and muscular dystrophy, was wheelchair-bound, and had a mental capacity of a 7-year-old child due to brain damage she sustained from being born premature. Her mother would tell people all of these things. Her supposedly much-needed medications were still in their home with her slain mother. And neighbors was fearing the worst for Gypsy. Quote, another post read, "I slashed that fat pig and raped her sweet innocent daughter. Her screams were so loud, LOL," unquote. But Gypsy Rose, 23, wasn't sick. Before her mother's murder case would conclude, Gypsy would plead guilty to second-degree murder and be sentenced to 10 years in prison. Her secret boyfriend, who she met online, Nicholas Godejohn, would be convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life behind bars. Greene County Sheriff Jim Arnett told reporters at the time, quote, "Things are not always as they appear," unquote. Their story has since been the subject of documentaries, a TV movie, and also a Hulu series called The Act. If you haven't saw that, it's amazing. And I will do my best to live stream that on my Facebook page as well for you guys. It's very good. It's very much. You really need to watch it before we start digging into this case. Even if you heard about this situation, you really need to see that. Just a little breakdown about this toxic relationship between these three. Dee Dee is the mother. Her actual name is Claudine. She was born in Louisiana in 1967. She was a large-sized lady, and she reinforced that by dressing in bright, cheerful colors. People who knew her remembered her as generous with her time and when she could be generous with money. But relatives remember her as devious, engaging in petty theft as retaliation for when things did not go her way. It also appeared Dee Dee's penchant for making those around her ill started before the birth of her daughter. Dee Dee's stepmother said that she believed Dee Dee tried to kill her by putting Roundup, which is a weed killer, in her food. The incident left her stepmother bedridden for 9 months. In 1997, Dee Dee's mother Emma died. Dee Dee herself was suspected of killing her by slow starvation. And according to relatives interviewed, this is exactly what happened. She also worked as a nurse's aide for a while. What she took away from that experience was a keen memory for medical terminology that would come in handy years later when discussing her daughter's condition with physicians. When she was 24, Dee Dee gave birth to a baby girl. She and the girl's father was 17-year-old Ron Blanchard. They had been together for between 4 to 6 months when she became pregnant, and he said they married, and when the baby was born on July the 27th, 1991, they called her Gypsy Rose. And it wasn't long before Rod realized he had made a mistake. Rod said, "I woke up on my birthday. It was my 18th birthday, and I realized I wasn't where I was supposed to be. I wasn't in love with Dee Dee, really, and I knew I got married for the wrong reasons." Rod and Dee Dee separated, and though she tried on more than one occasion to get back together with him, the pair ultimately broke up. Gypsy was really a fit baby. She was healthy at birth, Rod said, and while Dee Dee's nephew, Bobby, said he didn't believe she had any known health issues other than having possibly been born slightly premature. But at only a few months old, Gypsy became a mainstay at a local hospital. Dee Dee said she believed Gypsy stopped breathing in the night because she suffered from sleep apnea. But Rod recalled that doctors found nothing wrong with their daughter. Dee Dee was not convinced of that. She was convinced that something, and perhaps many things, was wrong with Gypsy. Dee Dee continued to seek medical treatment, and she told Rod that Gypsy had a chromosomal effect that caused their daughter many health issues, but she always seemed to have things under control, he recalled. She took Gypsy out of school before the girl reached 3rd grade, opting instead for homeschooling her. Gypsy managed to learn to read on her own by making her way through the, quote, Harry Potter series, unquote. When she was about 7, Gypsy suffered a cut on her knee while riding on her grandfather's motorcycle. And though her family said she appeared to be able to walk, Dee Dee insisted she would need surgery, and from then, her daughter was confined to a wheelchair. Gypsy went on to attend the Special Olympics in 2001, and when Dee Dee claimed her 10-year-old daughter was only 8, Gypsy was named the Honorary Queen of the Crew of Mid-City Parade, a parade for children held during Mardi Gras in New Orleans. Dee Dee said, "I have been very lucky. She is such a good child. She has never once complained." By then, Dee Dee had claimed Gypsy suffered from poor physical and mental development, was both hearing and vision impaired, was unable to walk, needed to be fed through a feeding tube, and had brain damage from seizures. She was often treated at the Children's Hospital while her mother stayed at the Ronald McDonald House. Doctors acting on Dee Dee's description for Gypsy's supposed seizures put the girl on anti-seizure medications. They also treated her based on Dee Dee's assertions that Gypsy had muscular dystrophy and frequent ear infections. Eventually, Dee Dee moved in with her daughter away from her family after they confronted her about her treatment of Gypsy. Mother and daughter moved to Slidell, where they lived in public housing and paid their bills using public assistance they were granted due to Gypsy's apparent medical conditions, as well as child support provided by Rod. In 2005, Slidell was hit by Hurricane Katrina, which knocked out power for weeks. Dee Dee and Gypsy went to a special needs shelter where they claimed their old apartment had been ruined and that Gypsy's medical records and her birth certificates was destroyed. There, the paramedic doctor who suggested they move to Missouri, and before long, they were airlifted to what would become their new home state. The relocation proved wonderful for Dee Dee, who had apparently just gotten started in benefiting from Gypsy's ailments. Dee Dee and Gypsy rented a house in Aurora, where the young girl with a tragic story became a media and charity darling. Gypsy was honored in 2007 Child of the Year by the Ole Foundation, which fights for the rights of feed tubing recipients. And in 2008, Habitat for Humanity built her and her mother a home of their own. The house was located in Springfield and came equipped with a wheelchair ramp and a hot tub. They benefited from free flights, free stays at a lodge for cancer patients, free trips to Disney World, and opportunities provided by the Make-A-Wish Foundation, including tickets and backstage passes to Miranda Lambert concerts, according to the reports. Dee Dee falsely told her new community that Gypsy's father was an abusive drug addict and alcoholic who didn't support or have contact with his daughter. But Rod continued to remain in touch with Gypsy and Dee Dee, sending them $1,200 in child support every month and speaking often with Dee Dee about Gypsy's condition. Rod occasionally talked with his daughter on the phone, including on her 18th birthday, when Dee Dee urged him not to mention the milestone, saying Gypsy believed she was only 14. He also continued to financially support Gypsy after her 18th birthday because she still required extensive care. There was never a question whether or not I was going to stop paying, Ron said. Dee Dee made sure to keep Gypsy firmly ensnared in the web of lies she had spun. Neighbors recalled Dee Dee always held her daughter's hand in front of company, which Gypsy later said was her mother's way of making sure she didn't say anything that would call into question her mother's story. Whenever she said something out of line, Dee Dee squeezed her hand. The control escalated in private, Gypsy said, claiming her mother hit her with a coat hanger or her open hand. Dee Dee's continuous push for medical interventions for Gypsy did not waver as her daughter grew older. Her mother used topical anesthetic to numb her gums before doctor visits. To address that so-called quote-unquote issue, Dee Dee had Gypsy's glands treated with Botox and then completely extracted. She also had tubes implanted into Gypsy's ears to control the many ear infections from which she claimed Gypsy always suffered. But not all doctors were swayed by Dee Dee's assertions. One pediatric in 2007 became suspicious of Gypsy's muscular dystrophy diagnosis and ordered MRIs and blood tests that found no abnormalities. I remember having her stand up, and she could hold her own weight, the pediatrician said. Unable to find a reason that explained Gypsy's inability to walk, the pediatrician told Dee Dee as much. He also contacted 2 doctors in Louisiana who had their own questions regarding Gypsy's condition, both of whom said Dee Dee stopped bringing Gypsy to them when they shared their concerns. Analyzing all the facts and after talking to her previous pediatrician, there is a strong possibility of Munchausen by proxy, which may be some underlying, unknown reason to explain for all of her symptoms. This was actually wrote in Gypsy's file by this pediatrician. Dee Dee never brought Gypsy to him again. The pediatrician did not report her to social services, saying he didn't at the time think he had enough information to call Child Protection Services. In 2009, police conducted a wellness check after receiving a call from an unknown tipster who claimed Dee Dee used different names and birth dates for herself and for her daughter. The caller claimed Gypsy was in better health than her mother let on, but officers accepted Dee Dee's false explanation that she purposely used misinformation to make it more difficult for Gypsy's abusive father to find them. It was around this time that Gypsy apparently began pushing back against her mother's narrative, but her attempts at having a say in her own life were met with severe consequences. In 2011, Gypsy attempted to escape her mother. She began communicating with a 35-year-old man she met at a science fiction convention, and the pair met in person at his hotel room. Though she was really 19, everyone believed Gypsy to be 15, and the community set out to track her down. Dee Dee eventually found them at the hotel and showed the man papers that indicated Gypsy was a minor. When they returned home, Dee Dee destroyed Gypsy's computer and cell phone with a hammer. Gypsy later said Dee Dee told her she would smash her fingers with the hammer the next time if she ever tried that again. Gypsy said her mother used a dog leash and handcuffs to restrain her to her bed for 2 weeks, and during this time, Dee Dee tried to declare Gypsy was incompetent. For months afterwards, Gypsy appeared to those who knew her to be subdued. She wasn't acting any differently than a normal child who was in trouble at that point. Kim Blanchard, which is no relation but a neighbor, had said, but Gypsy later said she believed at that point there was nothing she could do to convince anyone to believe her, and then she met Nicholas Godejohn. Gypsy and Nicholas being from Cleveland, Ohio, met online in a Christian singles group in 2012. The pair communicated for more than 2 years, and Gypsy confided in a neighbor about her budding romance. Gypsy and Nicholas talked about marriage and the names they'd use for their future children, and he apparently didn't care she was in a wheelchair. They also communicated sexually, with Nicholas introducing Gypsy to BDSM, and according to Gypsy, she later claimed she was uncomfortable with this thing, but said Nicholas convinced her to go along with it. For all of its parts, Gypsy said she was in love, but that she knew her mother would never approve, so she kept her relationship a secret while she plotted to have her mother and Nicholas meet. She and her mother went to the movies at the same time as Nicholas, but the outing did not go according to plan. Gypsy said she and Nicholas met in the bathroom, where they had sex before returning to the theater. But Dee Dee didn't take to Nicholas. Instead, Dee Dee regarded Nicholas, who in 2013 was arrested for watching porno on a tablet at a McDonald's for 9 hours. He was known to be quote-unquote creepy. Gypsy said, quote, she got jealous because I was spending a little too much attention on him, and she had ordered me to stay away from him, unquote. She also said, needless to say, that was a very long argument that lasted a couple of weeks. There was yelling, throwing things, calling me names. So Gypsy and Nicholas began plotting to kill Dee Dee, exchanging text messages that police and prosecutors would later uncover in their investigation. Reading in part, quote, honey, you forgot I'm ruthless, and my hatred of her will force her to die, unquote. Nicholas texted Gypsy, quote, it's my evil side doing it. He won't mess up because he enjoys killing, unquote. Gypsy says back, quote, I'm 100% in, hon. I'm really ready because I finally allowed myself to accept that you are my everything. I will go with you and we will live our dream, unquote. Nicholas returned to Springfield in June of 2015. He checked into a local motel while Dee Dee took Gypsy to a routine hospital appointment, and he waited until Gypsy let him know that they had returned and her mother had gone to bed. Gypsy let Nicholas in, handed him gloves and duct tape, and then passed him a knife. And then Gypsy later told ABC News, quote, "I honestly thought he would end up not doing it," unquote, but he did. Gypsy said that while she hid in the bathroom, Nicholas went into her mother's room and stabbed her to death. After Dee Dee was dead, Nicholas and Gypsy said they had sex on Gypsy's bed before taking a cab back to Nicholas's motel room. Gypsy later said that the sex began as consensual, but that it turned into rape, and that she only agreed to have sex with Nicholas in that instant so that he would not rape her mother's dead body. She said, quote, "I made a deal with him. I'd let him rape me, and then he wouldn't do that to my mom," unquote, she said. Nicholas, who could be heard saying in an interview with police he, quote, "at one point," unquote, considered having sex with Dee Dee's corpse, and he claimed the entire encounter with Gypsy was consensual. After that, Gypsy and Nicholas attempted to clean up the scene and took $4,000 in cash that Dee Dee kept in the house and she mailed the murder weapon to Nicholas's Wisconsin home. They took a bus to Wisconsin, and on June the 14th, Nicholas, at Gypsy's urging, used his phone to post 2 updates to Dee Dee's Facebook page. Gypsy later said she hoped someone would see the post and alert authorities so her mother's body would be found, and Gypsy's plan worked. Police discovered Dee Dee's body and began their investigation into what could have happened to Gypsy. They soon learned from Gypsy's neighbors, whom she confided in, that Gypsy had a secret online boyfriend, which sent investigators down the path to finding her and Nicholas. Police raided Nicholas's home, and both he and Gypsy surrendered to police. In 2015, Gypsy accepted a plea bargain that saw her sentenced to 10 years in prison. "I wished I would have never done anything," she later told Dr. Phil. "Anything. She just deserved to be where I am." Gypsy actually testified against Nicholas, and in February of 2019, he was sentenced to life in prison for killing Dee Dee. He was also sentenced to 25 years for an armed criminal action charge to run concurrent with his life sentence. According to her stepmother, Gypsy is thriving in prison. In 2018, she was working towards completing her GED and has physically rebounded from the unnecessary medical treatments she has received most of her life. Despite everything, she still tells me that she's happier now than she's ever been in her life, much happier in prison than she was with her mother. Christy Blanchard told the Springfield News Leader, quote, "and that if she had a choice to either be in jail or back with her mother, she would rather be in prison," unquote. This, I would have to say, is one of those cases that is not 50-50 as well. I would actually have to say this is one of those cases that's like 90-10. Like 90% of the people believes Gypsy should have gotten nothing. I mean, totally nothing, okay? This case is kind of split all kinds of ways. You have people out there that is pro-Nick. They feel like Nick got a bad deal. Gypsy's the one that planned the murder. Gypsy's the one that bought the knife. Gypsy is the one that handed him the knife, paid for his tickets to get to Springfield from Cleveland, paid for the motel room, paid for everything, and she's the one that planned the murder, bought the knife, handed it to him, the whole 9 yards. Nicholas, being a severely, in my opinion, mentally challenged person, I think he's a psychopath. I know he is. He has a split personality. Others said he had Asperger's, but I think it's deeper than that. There's many people that's pro-Nick and don't believe he actually deserves anything but a mental institution. And Gypsy is actually the one to blame. Gypsy is the one that should have life in prison. Gypsy should not have only gotten 10 years, and he got life when she was the mastermind. And she even admitted she's the one that told him to do it. All of this, considering there is that 10% that believe Gypsy should have gotten more than 10 years. It's just not right. okay? And then it says, okay, look at the abuse Gypsy suffered her entire life, which is so true. Her life was completely miserable, horrible, doesn't even touch what she went through. Completely abused her entire life. Her mother, oh my God, used her child as a meal ticket. Absolutely, there's no other way to see it. At her child's pain and expense, it was just terrible. Gypsy, how is she going to function? I mean, how will she function when she gets out of prison? A lot of people says that she's going to be manipulative because that's all she knows. She even looked Dr. Phil right in the eye and she says, you know, I can sit here, look you in the eye and lie to you, and I promise you'll believe every word I say. It's just a crazy case all the way around. We're just going to have to dissect this and go from the beginning to the end, just like we're going to have to do the rest of them, because this is definitely one of those what the hell cases. There's people out there fighting for Gypsy to have more than 10 years because that was an unfair plea deal because she was the mastermind. There's people out there trying to fight for Nick's, even his release, because they think he only needs a mental institution and not necessarily prison because he was set up. He was pretty much framed. People believe this now. Then you also have the people out there that's pro Dee Dee. You know, that, yeah, she was wrong. She was bad. She's a horrible person. But Gypsy could have got up and walked out. You know, Dee Dee did not deserve to be stabbed in the back in her sleep. Numerous, I can't even remember, that was numerous times she was stabbed plumb to the bone. It was very bad, but you have pro Dee Dee people out there as well. So this is one of those cases, and unless you know the case very well, it's going to be hard for you at this point to say, well, I'm pro this or I'm pro that, because, you know, this was just a briefing of what happened, and it pretty much touches on the gist of it, but then you kind of have to go back into it and look at both sides, and, you know, there's even things from her own family saying that Dee Dee probably didn't know any better because her mother sort of done her the same way as she done Gypsy. So, you know, it's just a real cluster F of mess. It was a perfect storm when Dee Dee met Nick. That's definitely a perfect storm. That was literally a match made in hell. It would have never ended well, no matter what. No matter what. Even if Gypsy would have got up and walked out, it would not have ended well. I'm just saying, all the people in the world, especially at a Christian dating site, how in the hell she would hook up, who the hell knows? And I'm not throwing down on him. So any of you Nick supporters out there, I'm not throwing down on him, but you cannot deny the fact that they were a match made in hell. So just be watching for each of these cases to start getting dissected really soon. Another one I'm going to touch on briefly, but may not go into it really hard, but then again, I might, who knows. It just depends on where it starts taking me, is Leslie Van Houten. She is supposed to be going up for parole at any time. She's getting another parole hearing before the end of this year. She's been denied all of them before. Some of you may not know who I'm talking about, and I'm sure most of you do, but she is one of the Charles Manson followers, and she is the one that is responsible for the LaBianca murders of the wife. It's a terrible thing, horrible thing that she done. But she's been in prison for 5 decades. She's been in prison, you know, my entire life since she was a teenager, and she's still there. And she is going up for parole again. She's went up for parole several times since convicted of life in prison, and it's always been denied. Well, this time, all of these big people are recommending her to be paroled. Even the author that wrote this book against her, totally against her, is absolutely on her side now, completely. And even wrote a letter herself saying she believes she should be released. I don't know how I feel about that. What she done was terrible. 50 years is a long time to think about what you did, but her victims never got that second chance. So I don't know how I feel about that. I personally don't think, honestly, that she deserves to be paroled. Seriously. what she done was absolutely horrendous, you know. But yeah, I mean, we're probably going to touch on that as well, because the Manson case, the Manson followers, has always been something that I have been into. I mean, I just have. I don't know why. I guess because all of that happened around the time I was born. And I don't know why. That's just the first true crime I ever heard about. And he was like, the Helter Skelter book, my mother bought it, and I remember seeing it all on the TV as long as I can ever remember back. Pig, wrote in blood on the wall, all that. And that is actually the case that started getting me interested in true crime back when I was 10. So, you know, that's just been one of those cases that I've always been interested in. I mean, how can one man get those many people to do what he says? It's just, of course it was a cult, but wow. And this was middle class homecoming queens, cheerleaders. And Manson really didn't look that good, you know. And I know in this day and age he definitely wouldn't be considered, but I'm even looking at, you know, guys in the 60s and 70s, and I just don't see how he was that damn attractive. But there was something about him that, I don't know, it was just crazy how they just literally flocked to him and believed his every word, and it was just crazy, unreal. But anyway, don't forget to join our Facebook page. That way you can be seeing the lives I'm going to be putting up this week, kind of going over all these cases that we're fixing to start dissecting. Don't worry, we're still going to do Watts. That's a given. I'm going to finish the discovery. That's a given. But, you know, let's start getting into some other stuff too, because, you know, that's what we are. We're UnJustified. We need to break down all kinds of cases. And it'll educate all you guys on maybe some true crime cases you don't know about. Even if you do know about them, we can kind of, what's happening with them now kind of thing. So I would really appreciate it if you can give us a thumbs up. That really does help our channel analytics get on up there. You know, people can see our channel more. You guys have a great night, day, or evening, wherever you're at. Thank you for listening. This is UnJustified.